Yeah, he said he got an infection and he almost lost his hand. So I was like, okay, note to self, never punch anybody in the teeth.
All the track tapes are ready.
I think you suggested this book to me, right?
Yep.
You had said, hey, there's this memoir out about Danny Trejo, and immediately when you said Danny Trejo memoir, I was like, I'm on board. I want to read it.
And he did release a documentary before this, but
you watched the documentary?
Watched the documentary, which he explained a lot, shared a lot, but just like any movie that's that there's a book about, the book provides way more details.
It gets in depth and provides detail about where he was when it starts from the very beginning when he's like 6 or 7 or something like that, living here in LA. And I think that's why, at least I feel closer to him than other actors, because he grew up in LA. We grew up in LA.
Valley also.
Grew up in the Valley. So a lot of things that he mentions throughout his memoir, like cities and places and things like that, I can relate to because we've been there, we've seen those places.
Mm-hmm. Like our parents just living back in the 60s, 70s, during the Vietnam era, all that stuff going on.
I never realized how old Danny Trejo was until I read this book. I was like, holy crap, he's in his 70s?
Yeah, and he's actually filming a movie right now.
That guy looks great. I guess we should start where he starts, right? He's like 6 or 7. He hangs out with his
uncle
sisters at first, right? He hangs out with a lot of girls. And he explains, like in the beginning, that he's always in a gang. And his very first gang was his gang of his sisters.
Yeah,
right?
Safety in numbers. He says that a lot.
He trades in the gang of sisters for his gang of like friends and his cousin Gilbert.
Uncle
Gilbert.
There's a lot of
really
Gilberts
only
in the
like 4 or 5 years older than him.
Yep.
His uncle Gilbert teaches him how to survive on the street, and also, more importantly, teaches him how to survive in prison.
He teaches him how to go pee.
Pee like a man. Standing up.
Yeah, which is kind of awkward and weird to say, but yeah, he grew up with a lot of girl cousins. His grandma.
He says he teaches them how to pee, but it just means like he teaches them how to stand up because he used to crouch. But did he teach them how to pee one-handed, two-handed, legs sprayed apart, leaning back a little bit? Like, how did he teach them? There's so many different ways, right? You find guys that's standing at the urinal. They all got their own poses going on.
Yeah, but I found that interesting. But he explains that he grew up with a bunch of girls and grandma, and he saw them squatting to pee, so he squatted to pee. He didn't know any better.
And then we go from him being a kid, and then the book goes to him being in prison. Actually, it kind of
goes back
and forth, right? Like him being in prison, and then it shifts back to his younger years. Yeah. I kind of wish the book was more straightforward, but I'm kind of iffy about that. Like I feel like it would have been too bland.
It's like him telling a story, and certain memories bring back like a situation when he was 5, or this actually takes me back to where I met Donal Logue at one of my offices as a janitor.
So when he's like when he becomes famous or starts working in Hollywood, he starts mentioning all of these names like they're his buddies and stuff. I'm like, oh my god, this guy's hanging out with some really cool dudes.
Yeah, Robert De Niro.
Yeah, and he just calls them like by his first name. So like a couple of times, I'm not even sure who he's talking about.
Or Bob.
Because he's talking about these people like with like nicknames or their first names, and like I don't know them by them. But then you see like pictures and stuff, and you're like, he's talking about Robert De Niro.
And if you're wondering, so a lot of people wondered, is it worth reading the book if you watch the documentary? Technically, it's the same thing because he talks about his life. Mm-hmm. But if you want to know more, definitely read the book. There's a lot more details, a lot more facts, a lot more about his sons, his uncles, his father, which he doesn't really talk about in the movie a lot. Just that he was like
in the book. So I only read the book. I didn't watch the documentary movie. But yeah, he talks a lot about his father and how that impacted him. So the beginning is really good because we get to see him in prison and the savage that he is in prison.
Oh my God. And you see him now, he's not that tall.
Yeah.
If you see him in some movies, he is buff, he's scary looking, but he explains a lot.
Yeah, the dude's a savage in prison. Like, he is basically a shot caller. He's a guy that can get you things.
He ran a protection ring.
I mean, he's the go-to guy, and it's for a reason, because you need to either be, like he says, a predator or a prey, right? And
right off the bat.
He made sure he was going to be a predator.
Because his uncle taught him all that.
His uncle Gilbert taught him all that.
He was like his father, his best friend, his mentor.
So we get glimpses of what it's like in prison, in a lot of Southern California and Northern California prisons.
Yeah.
In the 60s and 70s, right? Not today.
Back when they had the
we
race
get
wars.
old school information about prison. And if you ever seen a movie like Blood In, Blood Out and American Me, that's kind of like the life he was living. And it's so interesting because right before we started watching, or I'm reading this book, I watched American Me. And when I was reading the book, I was like, man, this sounds almost exactly like American Me. His father was a zoot suiter.
Yeah.
Raised
Back in the
his
riots.
son in LA. His son goes to prison, becomes a big shot in prison, and then turns it around at the end. It seemed like it was Danny Trejo's movie. I was like, man, did they rip this off?
But it's funny you bring that up.
Yeah.
Because also American Me, back when American Me and Blood In, Blood Out was going on, a lot of the backups and the extras were actual inmates and prisoners. But there was a thing. There was the whole American Me. They didn't get permission.
They didn't get permission
from,
because it was a
Mexican
true.
mafia.
It was representing a true story of real people.
Yeah.
Where Blood In, Blood Out was a fake gang,
Like
and fake
general. There was a big thing where prisoners who chose to work on the American Me film, a lot of them got killed after the movie aired because they were seen as traitors or they represented the wrong image.
And the reason why Danny Trejo's not in that movie,
He chose Blood In, Blood Out.
because Danny Trejo knew they didn't get permission, and there was going to be blood spilled, and Danny was like, I'm not having
He
that.
actually got a call from prison and they questioned him on the
They're
spot.
like, yo, what's going on with this?
Like, hey, Danny, I know you're up for both movies. What are you going to pick? And him being smart, like, he was pretty smart.
Street smart.
Smart in
He
everything.
knew there was going to be blood.
Yeah, he's a Blood In, Blood Out, of course. And
To me, Blood In, Blood Out, when I knew nothing about this, but I watched Blood In, Blood Out when I was like 8 years old.
yeah.
It was just like a super like bloody gangster movie, and I'm watching it like 8 years old, totally like
Oblivious of what's going on.
oblivious of what's going on, but totally like enchanted with the story.
But a lot happened, man. It was.
And I always wondered as an adult like why he was in certain movies, and this kind of explains why.
And even that movie, it's like he went back to San Quentin and they filmed in this old cell that he actually did time in. And in the movie, he had a small part, right? He just played like the guy. I'm sending
tough
you,
guy. Tough guy number one.
Tough guy, yeah. Tough guy number one, tough guy number two. But when he explains it in the book, is they used them a lot to talk to the inmates, get permission to film here, to wear certain colors.
Yeah. He's sort of like a liaison.
And a lot of the actors, before filming, he said that they saw him as like this C-grade actor or whatever. But once they saw him walk into the prison and the prisoners were yelling, like cheering him on, and he started protecting the actors from the prisoners and working as like the middleman. Then they respected him a lot more. They were like walking behind him everywhere.
What surprised me too about his time in prison was the diversity of jobs you can have in prison, or the locations as well. Because not only was he in prison in a cell, he was also a firefighter. I had no idea that if you got in trouble, you would go to a special camp and they would make you a firefighter. Not just anybody. You have to be like in a special circumstance. And I think for Danny, he was like physically fit and young enough to be in these firefighters.
Yeah, and he was respected enough because even though he was a prisoner, inmates here and there, he wasn't like a bully. He didn't get in trouble intentionally. Like a lot of the stories he shares.
I think he got in trouble a lot because he had to draw a line in the sand, and he had to make sure everybody knew they were not going to F with him.
Because a lot of times he was the only Mexican in school. They tried to jump him, so he had to play the crazy card, and he ripped the guy's neck off, or like part of his neck.
He like bit somebody's neck or something like that.
He attacked the Navy guy, or wasn't it? Yeah.
So we get set up. So we get set up with all of these crazy, savage stories of him in prison and
just
crime life and drugs, drug abuse, and a sad childhood. And then we transition to him being like a Hollywood star. And it's a slow transition, although his transition from being like a hardcore criminal to being like sober and a straightforward guy is like fairly straight cut, right? Like he makes a decision in solitary confinement that he's going to go straight, comes out.
Because he was sure he was going to die.
Yeah, it was either death or going straight. So he goes cold turkey, and then he gets out of prison, and then it's this slow evolution of him trying to be a better person. And that I found that to be like so compelling, like this evolution of a person from a savage to a citizen.
He was raised a Catholic, but he didn't really believe it because didn't they say he was stoned in his first communion?
His first communion, he was like, no,
Like,
something
I was
like
still
that.
asking money for bubble gum, and this guy's stoned and doing like heroin.
Yeah.
So I think he made a pact with God, right? If you get me out of this, like I'm gonna go straight. And
So the middle section of the book is really about him, like, helping build all of these different drug abuse centers,
like
right?
drug and alcohol recovery centers.
Yeah. And that was interesting too, because I never knew how those operated. Apparently they're like either from donations or state funded or federally funded. And the doctor he works with helps set up these centers, and it changes people's lives.
Yeah, he did that a lot, like nonstop, while trying to raise a family, marrying, divorcing, divorcing, having kids, in and out of prison also because he always found himself in situations to defend himself or...
Well, when he went clean, I don't think he went to prison anymore. I think... Well, he got into a fist fight with a dude and then got an infection in his hand because he punched the dude in the teeth.
Yeah,
but he didn't go to jail for it.
That's true.
That's true. Because sometimes when you punch people in the teeth, you get an infection.
They got rotted teeth or they ate something nasty.
Yeah, he said he got an infection and he almost lost his hand. So I was like, okay, note to self, never punch anybody in the teeth.
Yeah. But it's just crazy, his life. A lot of times he could have died, right? From that, he had wasn't a heart attack.
Oh, well, he ages rather rapidly, I think, in the book. He comes out of prison, although he spends a lot of his younger years in prison. So a lot of those years are
That's when he was in and out, yeah.
And then in his later years, I'm thinking like 40s, he starts acting. So like pretty late in life.
And even that story, they explain it in the movie. In the book, he goes into more detail how he was helping some kid trying to recover.
Yeah.
So he goes to this warehouse, which became a film set. Yeah. And the kid, I guess he ran off to do the drugs. He never saw him again in his life.
Yeah, that was like the only sad part. Like Danny goes to a film set to help some kid because he called him and he's like, Danny, I need help. Danny goes to the film set. And on the film set, some director, so somebody comes up to him and they're like, hey, you got a face for Hollywood, son. Do you want to be in my movie? And Danny's like, yup. And then he just completely forgets about that kid he was supposed to help.
Yeah.
I think he tried to look for the kid. He didn't find him. So, I mean, how much do you got to look for a kid? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, because they told him, like, I'll pay you $200 if you be an extra. Do you know how to play a prisoner? He's lived, like, most of his life in and out of prison or juvenile hall or whatever. Yeah. He's like, sure. Like, yeah, I know how to do that.
And he explains how he has actually been acting his whole life, right? He had a terrible childhood, and he's had to act like everything was okay.
Act tough or act like everything's okay, like he's not scared, all that. No, just that story is crazy. And they found out he was a boxer. He was like champion in prison. And he started training the main actor because there was a boxing scene. And after they saw him boxing and just the way he was, like, you know what? You're actually going to become, not the main guy, but the main prison inmate fighting with the main actor.
Yeah, because he had good moves, and the director liked how he moved on camera with the fighting scenes.
And that started it all. And
so Danny Trejo's like Hollywood career didn't explode. If you follow him over the years, he's always like that guy in the background, right? You're like, oh, I remember his face.
Prisoner number 2.
Yeah, and then slowly over the years, he becomes huge in Hollywood just because he's like a mainstay, right? Like he's always there. And what I like about him is that he said he really appreciated being there, right? So he was easy to work with. He was willing to do anything.
As long as he got paid.
And I think directors and people that work around him like that, right? He's always a dude that you can depend on.
Not just that. Hollywood was crazy. The main actors can do whatever they want, get away with stuff, and they couldn't control them, right? Because they had to make these $1 million movies. Yeah. And Danny Trejo, he didn't care who was the main star. He didn't care what was going on. He was there to do his job. And he put a lot of people in their place.
Yeah, he put everybody in their place, keep everybody in line. So directors liked him because they would put like these prima donna actors,
young actors,
And that's I think what impressed me. I was totally shocked. I was shocked by this whole memoir because Danny Trejo was a name I knew, but not in depth. I knew he was an actor. I knew he had his own cool Machete movie, but I knew nothing about him. So reading his memoir was just like totally eye opening. One about Hollywood. 2 about prison in California in the 60s, and 3
fighting.
Yeah, just about Danny Trejo and how he had to overcome all of these crazy obstacles just to be on camera.
Yeah, and his uncle always taught him never to be a bully. He talks about fighting a guy at a bar, knocking him out, and then peeing on him. And his uncle, who's like this hard criminal, tells him, like, I don't want to see that again. Like, you don't ever like step on a guy when he's down already. You don't embarrass someone when you've already won. Like, he hated bullies and all that, and he learned from there on. And
so Danny wrote this book with Donal Logue. I think Donal Logue wrote the book, and Danny kind of like just told him about it, right? And then Donal put it together, and I was like, "Who's Donal Logue? I think I remember." And then I see pictures because in the book they have pictures. I'm like, "Oh, that's that dude." And then it starts coming back to me. Donal Logue has been in a bunch of movies.
Yeah, and this is how do they even know each other?
Yeah,
this guy grew up hard life, prisoner. And here they are, like best friends, writing a book together. Like, what? They ran in reindeer games, I think.
Reindeer games, I think it was.
Yeah.
And is he the guy? So he's the guy at the end where he's talking about how on reindeer games he almost fell into the snow. Yeah. And Danny caught him, and he was like, "Bro, got your back."
And if you know Donald, he's like what? He's tall.
He's a big guy.
It's a big dude. And Trejo just caught him like nothing. He was already 50, 60.
So towards the end, spoiler alert, towards the end of the story, he's like 70. He's an old man, although he's still very active in Hollywood and in his community. So props to him, dude. I wish I could be I hope I could be that active when I'm old.
Right?
I feel like I'm going to hit 40 and just stay in my bed all day.
Right?
Like that dude gets out of bed and goes like feed homeless people and help drug addicts and stuff like that. I'm like, man, I can barely get up and make myself a cup of coffee.
Right? This guy has donuts, coffee, beer, restaurants, cantinas, like bars everywhere, and he's still working.
He's still working. His face is known worldwide. There was a scene that had me cracking up.
See? The scene.
I know, scene, sorry. There was
everything
a piece in the book where Danny is taking his mom to see a mural of his face on a wall. And his mom is looking at the mural and then looking back at him and looking at the mural and looking back. And she's like, "Why would anybody paint a picture of you?"
Yeah. And he's known across the world, like you said. And
he's known in Hollywood, but I really think that the reason why people love him and that he's known is because of his social work with people. Not necessarily Hollywood. I think the amazing social work he does with younger people, addicts and things like that.
Yeah, because he's just so honest and he's been there, done that, so it's easy to believe him. He's just straightforward.
I think his Hollywood career just helps amplify his message.
Yeah, I think he mentioned everywhere he films or goes, he finds like a youth home or a juvenile hall.
Yeah, he would travel the world, travel the U.S., and he'll go to the local place where they keep all the
the troubled kids,
and then help them out, give them a word of advice.
Or just show up and talk to them, just hang out. Or even shelters. He mentioned shelters too, because the dogs are technically in prison too.
Oh yeah, even dog shelters. Jeez. Yeah. He goes to dog shelters and he's like, "He's gonna be all right, buddy." I think he mentioned at the end that he has several dogs he probably rescued.
All adopted.
Yeah. So what is your craziest Danny Trejo moment in the book?
In the book, he talks about he gets out of prison, he meets up with a friend, and they just start doing crime and selling drugs and all that. And I guess they were so messed up, they ended up crashing on a tree in the park and waking up. They're all drugged up. They crashed, could have died. They get out of it, wake up, take guns out of the trunk, run away, do some crime and, sell drugs, do some deals, go to a hotel with hookers and all this crazy stuff. And then he comes back. They pick up the car and go on their way.
He said he goes on a crime spree with some white kid from the suburbs.
I think that's him, the one that sold him out.
That sells him out at the end.
But just that situation was
insane. Man, and that is crazy too. So he goes on this crime spree with this white kid from the valley, and then the white kid sells him out to work with a DA or FBI or something.
Someone.
And then, so Danny goes to prison, but we come full circle towards the end where Danny meets that kid on the street again, and he's strung out, and he looks disgusting, and he's telling Danny, the cops pretty much flipped me. They kept putting me in all these situations where I have to rat on people. Yeah. They kept giving me drugs. The cops did not help this kid whatsoever. They just kept using him as a rat.
And he picked him up as a hitchhiker, and when he saw him, he even said if it was my old self, he would have killed him on the spot.
I was like, oh my God, this kid
this was
had a terrible
40 years later.
I thought the kid would at least, when he turned in Danny,
turn his own life around, right?
I thought he would at least turn his life around. Like
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, he's working with the cops. The cops are gonna let him go. He's gonna go back with his nice family, and everything's gonna be fine. No, that kid takes a dark turn. I feel like this book is really about choices, right? Strong choices. The choice Danny made to go sober and to turn his life around.
Choices.
I'm not talking about the kind of choice you're like, should I get a cheeseburger or should I get a chicken sandwich?
Yeah,
No.
Coca-Cola.
Not
Pepsi,
those kind of choices. I'm talking about life-defining,
Man.
life-changing choices.
Like picking American Me or Blood In, Blood Out. You know? Another thing is him talking about Greyhound bus stations. Like, I seen, what was his name? The Night Stalker? How they found him at a Greyhound bus station. Because a lot of criminals would meet there, and he mentioned in the book that before the internet, that was like the
that
dark
was the
web.
interchange for all the criminals. That's where they all met.
Criminals, soldiers, pimps, hook, you know.
Yep.
And yeah, it was insane. That I found interesting.
So is that still true for Greyhound bus stations? I've driven past a couple and they look pretty filthy inside.
Right? But hey, if you need to find out something, you go there and ask around. Just watch out for the undercover
That's
cops.
the door to the underworld. It's the Greyhound bus station.
Yeah. So some of the movies he's been in. Anaconda. Did
He's
you know
been
he
in
was
a
in there?
gigantic list. I didn't. So a lot of the movies he mentions, I didn't even remember that he was in the movie until he mentions it. I'm like, oh yeah, he was an anaconda. He
Yeah.
got eaten by a freaking snake.
I had to look it up because I seen Anaconda a few times, but I don't remember that. It was just he actually
Yeah,
looked like
in
a
my
logo
head,
from the
like
Amazon.
thinking about that movie, I'm like, okay, Jennifer Lopez, Ice Cube,
Uh-huh.
and then Angelina Jolie's dad.
And the main guy, the evil white guy, what's his name?
Angelina Jolie's dad. I have no idea what his name is, but to me, that's who he is.
Yeah. I don't know
And he's like, Danny Trejo is like his assistant or something like that on the boat.
Yeah.
And then he gets eaten.
He gets eaten by the anaconda.
He's the character, because in all these scary movies, you need a character that's going to get eaten first so you can show the audience the danger,
Yep.
right? And Danny Trejo is that first guy to get eaten by the snake, so the audience can be like, oh my god, there's snakes!
He might still hold the record for the actor that's most killed in Hollywood, right?
He's still acting, so technically he can get killed a couple
because that's
more
what he
times.
was known for. I think he beat the amount of movies he's been in than John Wayne.
He was in...
Because he loves John Wayne.
Yeah. He was in Sons of Anarchy. I didn't even remember that until he told me.
Same here.
And I love that show. And I'm like, oh yeah, he was in that show.
Yep.
The only thing I remember him specifically being in was Machete, of course, but also those Spy Kids movies.
Spy Kid movies.
Those terrible Spy Kids movies.
But kids loved it.
Kids loved them for some reason. I watch them, I'm like, they barely make sense.
Yeah.
The first one's okay. It has Antonio Banderas in it for some reason.
Oh.
They got some big actors
Oh,
for that
Cheech
one.
Marin, he's in there.
Yeah, that was amazing. And I like how Danny's character is not the evil character like you would expect, right?
He was like the high tech uncle
Yeah,
or something, right?
he's the uncle
Making
that
their
has
gadgets.
gadgets and whatnot.
Yeah,
So,
but
I mean-
kids loved them and they played them for Halloween.
Oh, and then,
Either
another,
Machete or that.
and then another crazy scene is like he breaks his jaw one time. He like passes out on the stairs or something, falls down, breaks his... No, he does break his jaw, but he has like some kind of internal brain bleed.
We'd have to do surgery, yeah.
And then instead of going, or he goes to the hospital, the doctor's like, yeah, you broke your jaw, don't talk. And Danny's like, well, I gotta go do a movie. The doctor's like, I don't fucking care. And so Danny goes to do that movie.
My God.
And while he's doing the movie, he has to say some lines, but he can't really move his jaw. So he's kind of like just, moving his lips without moving his jaw. And the director's like, I love it.
What made you do that? Is it for like to make you seem tougher or something? He's like, yeah.
That's it.
That's
Perfect.
Then he goes back to the hospital and gets the surgery done.
And then he goes back to the hospital, and his ex-wife has to argue with the doctors to convince them that there's something seriously wrong.
Because she's in the medical
They
field
do they do a CAT scan or something. They're like, oh my God, your brain's bleeding. And then they do surgery, and he has to like relearn how to walk and a lot of things. And he has like this huge medical ordeal in the middle of his Hollywood career.
Yeah, and he's giving like the nurse that's supporting him like a bunch of crap, giving her a hard time, but at the end they both work it out. I don't know, man. This guy's just tough as hell.
He's a tough dude. Tougher than me. He cares a lot more than I do.
Right.
Exactly.
And he still hasn't stopped. Like I mentioned earlier, he's filming a movie right now in Italy or something.
Is he?
Yeah.
Really? Holy crap.
Yeah. So I got him on Instagram, and this guy's always doing
I'm
something.
dreading editing this video.
All the track stations are ready.